Asia and specialist in the cultural history of the Pakistan-Afghanistan border region. I'm really grateful to Bloomsbury, Pakistan for the chance to welcome you all tonight to the Bacha lecture, to chair this event, and especially to introduce our speakers. I am honored for reasons that should be clear soon. Our first speaker is Dr. Mukulika Banerjee. She's director of the South Asia Center at London School of Economics and associate professor in the Department of Anthropology. She was awarded her doctorate from Oxford University, where she worked on history, memory, and narrative surrounding Abdul Ghaffar Khan, aka Bacha Khan, and the nonviolent Khudai-Khidmatgar movement for social reform and anti-colonial liberation in the colonial northwest frontier of British India. This work was published in 2001 as The Pathan Unarmed. It was based on extensive oral interviews in Pakistan and combined approaches from subaltern studies, critical narrative studies, methods in the interpretation of oral history and memory. It was a watershed in studies of this highly significant movement and was formative to my entire subfield. Not only that, many of my friends and colleagues in Peshawar remembered the now Professor Banerjee to me during my own fieldwork as a model researcher. So I feel several types of connection here. Just one reason that it's an honor for me to introduce our speakers tonight. Professor Banerjee has since published widely on multiple other topics, including democracy in India. Her most recent book is Why India Votes in 2014. But I'm especially happy that she'll be talking about her older work and Bacha Khan's legacy tonight. Now, alongside Professor Banerjee, please join me in welcoming Mr. Ziauddin Yousafzai, who will comment after Professor Banerjee's lecture. Ziauddin Yousafzai is Education Attaché at the Pakistan Consulate in Birmingham. He's also a Global Education Advisor to the United Nations. He served as a teacher for 18 years in Pakistan, during the course of which he founded and managed his own independent school. Starting from scratch in 1994 with only a handful of students, by 2012, the student body had grown to 1,100. Mr. Yousafzai is also the father of Nobel Prize winner and internationally known activist Malala Yousafzai, and he's co-founder and board member of the Malala Fund. This is a global organization working for girls' secondary education. Among their notable activities include work with and scholarships for refugees and students displaced by conflict in Lebanon, Jordan, Gaza, and Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, Mukulika Banerjee and Ziauddin Yousafzai. We'll start off with a 45-minute talk by Dr. Banerjee, then pass the microphone to Ziauddin Yousafzai. Then we'll go to a Q&A session, and we'll end around 8:30. We can go a little over if we want. Right, so please join me in welcoming Dr. Mukulika Banerjee to the podium.
Thank you, James. I have no idea that anyone would in Peshawar University would remember, so that's very nice to hear. And thank you for your very warm words. I have to say it's a little bit daunting to be speaking to this audience. I don't try to think that there's several reasons. One is the Pathan Unarmed, my first book, came out in 2001. So it's been a very long time since I really engaged with this material. But the work that went into it and the experience of doing the research for it has, to not be hyperbolic, but it was one of those transformative events in my life. I don't think I was in any way the same person again after the experience of doing the research. And I should say at the beginning that I can imagine there may be questions about that. I'll try and not be too autobiographical about it, but I welcome questions. If you want to ask me about that, I'll be happy to answer them later. The other reason why it's daunting is because it's very rare to speak to an audience that knows what I'm talking about already. And it's, you're an audience that knows, and there's a reason why you're here on a Friday night so late in such wonderful numbers, because you know why the story is important, and I hope what I have to say will add something to what you already know and provide some insight. And the third reason why it's daunting, but also a huge honor, really, to be speaking with Zia Saab. I know Malala is a household name, literally, my 12-year-old daughter read her book last year, and it's, so she refers, it's a point of reference for her. So while the world is going slightly loopy at the moment about the loss of Hillary Clinton and has the glass ceiling been shattered and so on, I think from our part of the world there is some amazing ceilings have already been shattered. And I think Malala is an absolute symbol of that radical intervention that young women can make, or a young girl in her case. So it's a great honor to be speaking in your company and alongside you. And really I was thinking when Nader and I were discussing this, and Nader, thank you for your invitation to speak on this occasion and to Bloomsbury, Pakistan. The idea was, there are two ways in which we could do this. We could just retell the story, what it was, and I think there is stuff. If you haven't read the book, how many of you have actually read the book? In which case you can leave, because you might not learn anything. Oh, no, I'm kidding. Please stay, because what I'm going to try and do is go over what's in the book, and I'm relieved to see that not many people have read it, but also to reflect on why we should be talking about this story today, which is why I've called it Bacha Khan's legacy and its relevance, really, to today's world. And really, what Zia Sahib himself has been doing, and Malala's fearless action in the field of education is exactly what Bacha Khan's legacy is. So that is a vivid example, and I'll show you why with some more. So towards the end, so I'm going to structure it in such a way that I will go over the story of what was going on with Bacha Khan, with the Khuda Ki Madkars, and then end with 6 tentative broad ideas of what I think the legacy of such movement is in our contemporary world. So I'll try and stick to half an hour so that we have plenty of time, otherwise since we've started late. Okay, so this is the image of Bacha Khan. The one that you can see up there is one of the latest images. He died, as you know, in 1988 on the 20th of January. And this is a very old Bacha Khan. This is the way many of us remember him from newspaper reports and so on, depending on the age. There's a wonderful age gradient in this audience, so some of you have probably never seen photographs of him, which is fine. You'll see them now. The period I'm talking about, I should clarify, is entirely pre-1947. And I know many of you will have questions about the legacy of the Khuda Ki Madkar movement in contemporary Pakistan. I'm not going to be talking about it, though I lived in Wali Khan's house. He was the leader of the ANP at the time. I saw ANP politics very closely, but I won't be talking about that today. But happy again to take questions to the best of my ability, and there are people here who have more recent knowledge. And for those of you, there are always people in Britain who have no idea what British India looked like, which is why I take the precaution of putting a map up. But I think most of you know what and you know where the Northwest Frontier is. You will also forgive me, I'm of course aware that the Northwest Frontier province has been renamed. The period I'm talking about, it was still called NWFP, and that's probably the term I'll be using most of the time because that's the period I'm talking about. Now, Bacha Khan is remembered in many ways, and I want to show you 2 or 3 images in the way that he's remembered in India. And this is a sketch done by Nandulal Bosch in Shantiniketan, who, of course, was, he had met Bacha Khan had been there, and Ghani Khan, Bacha Khan's oldest son, had studied at Shantiniketan, where he was also very close friends with Indira Gandhi. And he was a very artistic man. If any of you went to Ghani Khan's house, his house was full of paintings and books. He wrote poetry. He was a man of real culture and ideas. This is the kind of image I grew up in India. This is every time Bacha Khan came to India, this is the sight that would greet him, and it would be on the front page of newspapers. So, of course, the point to note is the attentive body language of all the Indians around him. Very prominent people, Sanjeeva Reddy, I think that's Moraji Desai at the back. Bacha Khan a foot taller than everybody else, but also his entire luggage was what he's carrying in his hands. And this was an enduring feature of his life, really. He had a little bundle of possessions, and that's what he had, and that was him. And that's a very important part of who he was. Shall I turn this around so you can see? Can you see? Yeah, so maybe you can see.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So, and then he would come back. He came back for, say, the Congress centenary celebrations in 1985. He visited Wardha. He visited the old Congress haunts. And here is a photo op of him on the charkha, spinning cotton. When I managed to get to the Northwest frontier, and it's a long story how I got there, and I won't be talking about it, like I said, but I thought in and around Peshawar and Charsada, where I was living in Wali Khan's house, I would see a lot of Bacha Khan. But actually there wasn't a lot out there in the public sphere, but you did see, this is just a fruit juice stall on the side of the highway between Peshawar and Charsada where we'd stopped. It wasn't very easy for me to just get out and take pictures anywhere I wanted. I wore a chador and tried to maintain as much modesty as was that I could muster. But these kinds of images were there, and people clearly, this person meant something to people around him. Now my visits were between 91 and 93, so just a few years after he had died. And then somebody made this painting, which I think is just a nice image to decode as Bacha Khan, as crusader. Of course, the shirt of mail, the spear, the steed, all that is, the iconography is there. But of course, he's a non-violent soldier. And that's kind of the way he was remembered and hid. When he died, it was his death that got me interested in him and the movement, because I was a graduate student at the Delhi School of Economics, and we were reading the anthropological literature on Pashtuns, and it was all about revenge and violence and honor and Pakhtun-Wali. And in the middle of all that, Bacha Khan died, and the newspapers were full about non-violence and this Frontier Gandhi, as he was known in India. And it just seemed like a bizarre sort of juxtaposition of two different facts that didn't fit together. So to remember him as a crusader, and what he was crusading for is really what we'll unpack here. So all of this work culminated in my book, my first book called The Pathan Unarmed, which was based on my doctoral thesis, which I did at Oxford as a graduate student. Now, the reason why I was interested in this movement was because of this curious contradiction. To have the words Pathan or Pashtun or Pakhtun and unarmed together just didn't seem to work. Right? It seemed like a bizarre joke. How could you do this? Nothing in our literature, in our stereotypes, in our films, in every way in which Pakhtuns entered public conversation and imagery was to be hot-headed, out of control, whether it's Kipling, whether it is Tagore, that's how they were known. So the question that was driving my research was, how on earth can you have men, young men, Muslim, Pakhtun, non-violent? How did these factors come together? That's really what I was trying to understand. Now, the basic facts and I just wanted to put them all in one place, so for any of you who don't know, it's worth just remembering that this movement, and I was studying a movement, and the movement was led overwhelmingly, and by charismatic leaders are important, and this was during the subaltern move, as Nadir said or James said in his introduction, that subaltern studies questioned elitist narratives of historiography. But in the Khuda Khidmatgar movement, Bacha Khan was clearly head and shoulders above anyone else around him, and was driving the movement for 17 years and more. And therefore, his figure emerges as a very important aspect of the movement. But of course, it was a mass movement. And I'm also aware, and Akbar Zaidi is in the audience, and he's asked me this question already. We've just established about 15 years ago, and he will no doubt ask me again. So before he asks me, I will say that I'm using the word Pathan because that is very much in the period, certainly, that I'm talking about, is the term of self-identification by Pashtuns to outsiders, certainly in India. So amongst yourselves, you call yourselves Pakhtuns or Pashtuns, depending on where in the frontier you live. Outsiders, you say, I'm a Pathan. And that's certainly in India, where I was coming from, and certainly in the literature, that's how they're referred. So I use them all interchangeably. It doesn't mean anything. I'm not making a statement of any. The movement had two wings. The Khuda Khidmatgars, which you know means servants of God, had two wings, the civil and military wings. And importantly, between 35 and 47, it actually formed successfully 3 Congress ministries. And this military and civil wing worked in tandem together, and I'll say a bit more about that in a minute. But they had an equal ownership of the idea of this combination of Pakhtunwali, which is basically a sort of charter of how to be a good Pakhtun in that part of the world, of being Muslim, and of the choice of non-violence as a political strategy to fight the colonial government. And these are sort of the basic things you need to know about the movement. But it was a mass movement, and it's very difficult to establish just how mass, but there are varying figures, but it was the biggest thing that happened in the Northwest Frontier Province from the 1920s onwards, really. So I date it from 1930 for particular reasons, and I'll explain. But this is the only image, and if anyone in the audience has any other image of the Khuda Khidmatgars, I'll be eternally grateful to be able to at least see it. But this is the only image I found in the archives where you get a sense of the mass movement, where Bacha Khan is there in the front, and as you can see, little boys are there enthusiastically part of the movement, and there are absolutely hundreds and thousands of people behind him, all of them in their uniform. And the uniform, okay, so when I knew it was a mass movement, so I went to the Northwest Frontier looking for anyone who was still alive who could tell me about what the 1930s and 1940s were like. This was 1991 onwards, so you can imagine how old the people were. So the youngest person I found and talked to was 75 years old. So they were very elderly men, and it took a fair amount of looking for them, because after Pakistan was formed in 1947, one of the first things the Pakistani government did was to ban this movement. And it drove this movement underground. All the Khuda Khidmatgars were thrown into jail. So they lost a lot as a result of having been Khuda Khidmatgars, for having fought for freedom. And between 1947 and 1991, when I pitched up looking for these stories, they hadn't talked about this at all to anyone, because the fear of being identified as revolutionaries or being anti-India, as it was seen, or anti-Pakistan, pro-India, was very strong. And they had been silenced and written out of history completely, and their memories had been suppressed. So even talking to the sons of the revolutionaries, of the Khuda Khidmatgars, they would know enough to say, yes, my dad was, because the family suffered. But they couldn't tell me very much about the movement. So I really had to find the old men themselves. And so a lot of them obviously had passed away. And I tried talking to the families, but they couldn't tell me anything I didn't know from secondary sources, the little bit that existed. And I should say in the early 90s, very few people were working on Pashtun society. So there wasn't a huge body of literature to draw on. But since then, there's been a flowering of fantastic work, absolutely brilliant anthropology, historians, all kinds of really good writing, and if anyone wants to follow any of them up, I'll be happy to pass them on to you. And I know Kamila has just walked in a little while ago, and if you read her latest book, God in Every Stone, there is the most wonderful evocation of one character from the Khuda, but I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. So I went looking for them all over the frontier, and this is Varisha Kaka, who I found in Sawabi, And it was literally going from one place to the other, looking, asking to see who was sold. I spent so much time looking for them. My Pashto got rather good because I had all this time to work on my Pashto and learn it well. And then what was happening, and this is interesting, it's not meant to be autobiographical, but because I would arrive in somewhere and ask who the Buzurg was, and I would talk to them and so on, then I'd say, can you remember anyone else? And he'd say, oh, well, they're probably all dead. I said, but you're not dead, you're here, maybe your friend is. And he said, well, I don't know, I haven't seen him in 50 years. So I said, well, do you remember? He said, I sort of remember where he lives, in sort of 2-hour drive away. I said, well, let's go. Would you like to come? And of course he had nothing to do, an old 82-year-old, completely marginal old person in the village, in the household, yet, weak, frail, and silenced. The family didn't see him as a hero, so he was irrelevant. And so often they would come along, and so we had Habibullah, this wonderful young Pakhtun, not middle-aged Pakhtun man who helped me, who drove me everywhere, all over the frontier, had a car, and we had a pickup at the back. So it's the clamor in at the back, and we'd go to the next village, and then start looking, and we'd remember the name, then we'd find him. Sometimes we were lucky, and we found the person. But then, of course, I couldn't talk to start with, because these were two comrades meeting after 50 years. I mean, they had to have their reunion first. And then we would sit down and talk. And then if you had started early enough, then the two of them would come with me to the next place. And so by the end of the day, I had this gaggle of toothless, excited young old men who were heroes. They were fantastic, and they had these stories, and they were physically transformed. So the physical transformation of being able to tell the story of their nationalist struggle was extraordinary. And I can talk about that more, but I won't now. So this kind of gathering did used to happen. So sometimes I'd remember, and remember we didn't have smartphones, we didn't cameras. I felt very self-conscious taking out my camera. I had the ISI on my trail as well the entire time. So they were very suspicious of an Indian woman, a Hindu, what the hell was she doing, and so on. So I was very circumspect about taking pictures. I didn't record anything. Sometimes I took a picture, and this is what it looked like. So I found 75 of them, and I was very lucky to find Sarfraz Nazim, who was Bacha Khan's secretary at the end of his life, for the last 10-15 years of his life. And he was a wonderful, the picture is very good because he was a very saintly kind of person, as he looks with the glow of the sunset behind him. And had a lot, obviously, to tell me about what kind of person Bacha Khan was. And I even found a woman, Khuda Khidmatkar, the only one, Rana, who also told me stories of going on demonstrations. And of course, what I had done before going to the frontier was to spend several months in the India Office Library, as it used to be known, looking at the files of every fortnight. The Chief Secretary and the Commissioner of the NWFB used to send a report. So over a 17-year period, you can imagine how many reports there were to, so there was a blow-by-blow account of the movement as it developed. And the marginalia, reading it in Whitehall meant, reading it in London meant you got the Whitehall marginalia on those reports. So it was a real revealing. And in those reports, they did report women marching in the front, or women carrying Qurans on their heads, sometimes to petition in their pickets to the collector's office and so on. You do find mentions. So it was fantastic. I hadn't expected to find a woman, but I found Rana. So we could establish it was a mass movement, and it was a mass movement created entirely by the energy of this person, Bacha Khan, whom we are remembering, commemorating, honoring today. Now I love this picture because it completely shakes our assumptions about Bacha Khan, because he's young and handsome, as everybody remembers him in this, so this is probably what he looked like when he went round the frontier. Urging people to join the movement. Now, what he was doing between, and it's a very long story, and you can read it in the books, and most of you haven't, and there are others you can read, but what he was doing through the 1920s was trying to create an awareness that to start with, to spread the awareness that people were being ruled by a colonial government. Most people, as in large parts of British India, just didn't know the British were ruling them. It was so remote. They didn't, they were always oppressed by somebody, and whoever it was. And one of the ways, so he experimented with various ways of doing this, right, of spreading awareness. One thing that he, and there were different kinds of efforts, and there was a Khilafat movement, don't forget, there was the Hijrat movement, and the Hijrat movement, of course, required people to literally migrate to Afghanistan, which brought its own contradictions and humiliations, which he writes about with in great detail in his autobiography, which is available in Pashto and in Urdu, but not in, there is an English version, but it's a very short translation of it. But in the original version, he talks about that hijrat, humiliation of why joining hands with Pashtuns across the border was not a move of self-dignity, because you were always going to be pariah in somebody else's country, so you had to fight for your own. And therefore he came back and tried to, and he was clearly a very restless young man and wanted something to change. So he just started traveling through, and he had wanted to go abroad. He didn't, his mother cried, so he was a good son. He didn't go. His older brother, Dr. Khan Sahib, had already gone abroad to study medicine. So he stayed behind, and he had some key moments which shifted his perception and built up his anger about the colonial government. And one of the things he did was to, the Haji of Turanzai, who some of you will know, was already very active in trying to open schools. And this is something that, and this is why I think Zia Sahib, this is exactly what was going on in the beginning of the 20th century. This is, if you want to bring change, let's start with education. There is, you think that that's something you can do. If you have education yourself, if he was lucky enough, he'd studied in St. Edward's in Peshawar, he was going to start opening schools. They were called Azad schools, and he joined hands with Haji of Turanzai to do this. And another thing which every single person, every single village I went to, they told me without fail, was they remembered him coming. When I met them, said yes, he had come to this village, that's the cot where he slept, or he used to sleep in that corner. And he was such a simple man. He used to eat only one roti, and he wouldn't ask for anything. He never allowed anyone to eat more than one thing at a meal. If there was a plate of biscuits, everybody was allowed to take one, and then he sent the rest back for the family. Which in Pashtun society is a big deal. I don't know how many of you have been the lucky recipients of Pashtun hospitality, but it's really overwhelming. But he said this is wasteful, and we should be. Now, what he did traveling to these villages was to say, look, this is what the British are doing, they're exploiting, look at what the child of the British officer is eating, and look at your children running naked and wild and without education, without health care. We really have to look after ourselves. And this is our country, and they are not, who are the outsiders who come from outside. It was a very simple message about colonialism. But then he said, look at the state of this village. It's filthy. So we'll get rid of the British, let's just clean our village first. So he'd pick up the nearest broom and start sweeping the village. And of course, he came as this big Khan from Uthman side. Everybody knew him. And he was tall and charismatic and good looking, and must have looked like a Khan. He had the demeanor of one. So people were horrified. And he said, no, don't take the broom out of my hand. You can pick up one yourself. You can come and clean with me. So these cleanliness drives that he did through every single village, and it's a very clever trick because it got people involved. There was immediate gratification. It wasn't some deferred struggle for freedom that may or may not come. Cleaning your village was something people could do. And it also allowed him to connect with people, to establish his own humility, his relationship with the mass that he wanted to, not stand on ceremony. And also make a very profound point about self-reform, that unless you are ready to, there's no point asking for independence if you're not ready to have self-rule. You should be in a fit state to own this independence. So we have to reform ourselves. And that's a very radical idea at that point. Through the 20s, when the Khudai Khidmatgars got going, they began to develop these wear these uniforms. So I put the word Surkposh because this is something that a lot of people, especially in my parents' generation, I think across India, Pakistan would remember, that they wore these red uniforms. The colonial archives always call them red shirts. They, Khuda Ke Khidmatgar was too long to type and difficult to get your tongue around, so they just call them the red shirts. And it was an inventive move, and I'll talk about that. But here, first see this image, which is this. The original painting hangs in Chelsea in the National Army Museum, if any of you are interested. But as you can see, it's the 2nd Regiment of the Punjab Cavalry, Frontier Force. Now these are the people who were in the frontier. Remember, the Northwest Frontier was a very, very sensitive frontier for the British Empire. This was the area of the great game between the Soviet Union and Britain, very nervous about access to the jewel in the crown from the Khyber Pass. And therefore, the Northwest Frontier, this is key to understanding Bacha Khan's legacy, is that it was a very heavily policed and disproportionately policed part of the empire. And in the book, I also develop, in the opening chapter, an argument about the nature of the relationship between British colonial officers and local Pakhtun men. Because the guys, if you read the British accounts, they're out there wanting to have a really exciting time. They're coming out to the frontier because these are guys who can do guerrilla warfare. They're fire in the mountains, they're crack shots, they are charismatic, not like these rice-eating Hindus in the rest of the subcontinent. These are real men. And if you read all of Carroll's book, he says that. He says, you cross the Great Bridge at Attak, and then you see, here as men who look you in the eye, and so on. So there was the sense that they were somehow equal. And being fair-skinned and blue-eyed, as some of them were, also helped. So there was a racialization of the Pakhtun man, which went with its association with being crack shots and being very good with their rifles and guerrilla warfare. In that light, to see that a mass movement of Pakhtun men who say, okay, you know what, we're going to fight you but without guns, that caused a sort of consternation in the colonial administration that never really left them. And this was insult to injury, that they took their elite frontier force uniform and made it their own. So there were army deserters, or there were very inventive mochis, as we know. They would make up these Sam Brown belts. And so if you've seen this, go back to this. And they said, yeah, we look like them. As they said, we look like flowers. We were all in red, and our young men look so beautiful. And they got, I don't know where they got the red socks from, but the fabric of the tunic was khadi that had been made locally. What makes this image very poignant, and the reason why it's on the cover of my book, is it's the only uniform I came across in several months of living in the frontier and pretty much talking to anyone who was alive about it, because part of the post-1947 repression of the Khuda Ke Khidmatgar movement was so severe that any trace, any evidence, any records, any minutes of meetings, everything had been destroyed. Either it was destroyed by state actors or it was destroyed by people themselves because they didn't want to keep any evidence. So this man, Qudrat Shah Kaka, he had saved his uniform. So when I showed up, he pulled it out and he said, "Do you want to see my uniform?" I was like, "You have one." And he said, "Wait." And then he went and wore it and came out. So he was in tears, I was in tears. I mean, it was just momentous because I knew that's what they wore, but I'd never seen one, and certainly nobody else had one. The ANP, of course, I had lots of false starts because every time the ANP had a meeting, their volunteers all wore these red shalwar kurtas, which was, of course, not this. They just kept the color. So I kept thinking, oh, here they are, but they weren't. They were the new ones. So this was a khadi uniform, and Qudrat Shah said to me, he said, take this uniform with you. And I said, no, I can't take your uniform. You've saved it after, and so I didn't. And it's one of my biggest regrets I didn't, because of course I should have brought it and put it in an archive or a museum somewhere. And it would have, so I don't know what's going to happen to that. I think we've lost it forever, but it's the only one that was available. But at that moment, I was taking their stories, they were giving me enormous love and hospitality, and their blessings have stayed with me to this day. And I just felt I could not take it away from him, such an important part of his life. So, why the military idiom? Why did they wear uniforms? They wanted to, it brought discipline. Now, one has to realize that, I don't know whether you've spent any time thinking about civil disobedience, nonviolence in social movements, but as Malala's example shows, the one thing that civil disobedience requires is courage. You've got to be really brave to be able to do it. And, to be fired on, to be hit with lathis, and actually the kind of atrocities against the Khuday Khidmatgars wreaked by the colonial administration is of a completely different order than anything else you see anywhere in the British, certainly in the subcontinent, in British India. There was a lot of sexual violence directed against the men. And so there is evidence of this from Dr. Khan Sahib's report straight after the Qissa Khani Bazaar. I'll talk about that in a minute. But so there was a lot of provocation, and sometimes I hadn't picked up on this in the colonial archive, because obviously they were not reporting that, this is what they had allowed their men to do. But talking to some of these old men, through my Pashto, which wasn't obviously as fluent as to be able to understand the nuances of an elderly 90-year-old man, toothless, trying to explain sexual violence to me. It was quite a challenge. But when I realized what he was trying to tell me, and he was in tears, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and then I began to hear it again and again. So there was a lot of that. And I think there is some sort of weird psychological stuff going on between the sort of homoeroticism between the British and the Pakhtuns, which we can talk about if you want to. So in the face of that kind of provocation, discipline of not resorting to violence, which is in your DNA, which is what you've been, not in your DNA, but what you've been programmed to culturally to think, that you have to take badal, you have to take revenge, which is one of the three cornerstones of Pakhtunwali, the charter by which Pakhtuns try to live. So the army drills and how to demonstrate, how to picket was very important. They had bugles, they had drums. It was all quite merry, really, and that's how the discipline. So this is when Gandhi was visiting on one of his many visits to the frontier. This is a guard of honor by young boys for Gandhi. Now, 23rd April 1930 was a turning point, because up to this point, you see these images? Is the light? Oh, you can see, and the light is not too much on them? No, because there's old archival images that have been scanned. So, so this movement had been going on, and then there was already a small Congress organization in Peshawar. And remember, in 1930, the Purn Swaraj, or the complete independence call, had been called by Gandhi, and there was a nationwide agitation, and the Salt March was happening, and so on. So all Congress units from various parts of India joined in. And the Congress, which was very urban and quite elitist, did not have any purchase in rural areas. And so one of the things they did was to ask the Khuday Khidmatgars to help join in to this call for complete independence. And it's a very long story, which you can read about, and I won't talk about it here, but basically what happened, because of various reasons, and this is the bit that Kamila talks about very vividly in her book, is the massacre that happens in Qissa Khani Bazaar, which, for those of you who've been to Peshawar will know, is a very crowded part of the city, and basically an unarmed procession of protesters was fired upon, and various historians have tried to estimate the numbers, but it's about 230 people were just killed, and many more injured, of course. So it never has had the stature of Jallianwala Bagh, but here the provocation, people were not even, they were just not even warned. There was no curfew as there was in Amritsar. This was just a peaceful demonstration, and people were fired on. And after that, it became very important that the Khuday Khidmatgars were then, because they had provided the mass base, were then under severe threat of being completely banned and repressed by the colonial administration. They needed to have bigger political allies. A proper alliance needed to be formed. They approached the Muslim League wasn't interested, and then they went to the Congress, who said, you can be part of this. It was very good for the Congress because this was a Muslim majority province with the Khuda Ke Nagars. With them, they could lay claim to being a genuinely Indian movement as opposed to a Hindu movement, which was always a charge they were susceptible to. So that's a very long story in 2 sentences. And then so you got this, the next few images are all from the archives of various dealings with the Congress. And what Bacha Khan did was the Congress administration, the Congress bit of the movement was the civil wing. So these were people who were educated, often urban. They had the meetings, they made decisions, they took the, when to pick it, how to pick it, who else they were going to, corresponding with other Congress units in the country, attending Congress summits, the All India Congress meetings. All that was, and then the rank and file were very much in the military wing, where younger people could be recruited. They wore uniforms. They were the ones who were the foot soldiers. They were the ones who were really doing the picketing and doing the hard work. But it was a division of labor. And Bacha Khan himself, always his heart was with the Khuda Ke Nagars, with the, he never wanted to really be the chief minister or be a leader with power. Power of that kind clearly did not interest him. And it was a very good division of labor that he formed with his older brother, Dr. Khan Sahib, who got pulled into, with the Kissa Khani Bazar thing. He was, he was leading a very sort of expat kind of life. He had come back from England with an English wife. But he because he heard about the massacre and went out to treat the injured, he saw how awful it was and got sucked into the politics and was the chief minister every time they won the election. Dr. Khan Sahib was chief minister, Bacha Khan would be off working with the people, traveling all over India, talking to other allies and so on. So you have lots of images of Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan with various Congress leaders. And so I just wanted to say something about, I've talked about Pukhtunwali a little bit, about, Ghairat, about honor, about how important courage was. This is something that Pushtun men understood. But they also were devout Muslims, and they were constantly badgered with charges that they were Hindus. Bacha Khan, you'll see in earlier images, if you remember the very first one, this one, he used to wear a topi, right? Everybody wore headdresses in that generation. And the number of times people said he was a Sikh, he was a Hindu, he was hiding long hair and so on. He finally one day stopped. He said, I'm never going to cover my head again because I'm sick of these questions and I'm not going to answer this forever. And the Sikh story is very interesting, but you can ask me if you want to hear why they might have thought he was Sikh. But they were also Muslims, and what Bacha Khan was doing clearly was trying to get people's buy-in by saying you don't have to compromise the things that are really important in your life to turn non-violent. Because, and the quick way to explain this was that in Islam, yes, we have the notion of the jihad, but we have jihad-e-asghar and we have jihad-e-akbar. And the jihad-e-akbar, which is the greater jihad, is the internal jihad. It's about patience, it's about restraint. And those were the bits of the Quran that he used to try and persuade people that actually there was no contradiction. There was nothing about Islam that forced you to take up arms. That was the point that he was making, and and people were persuaded. So when people were telling me 50 years after, remember, of not having talked about it, they remembered the surahs, they remembered his explanations, they remembered what he had used as evidence. So there was a different kind of working of Islam in this part of the nationalist movement than you had. And then, of course, you had this constant, in the rest of the nationalist movement, there also was this constant tussle between violence and non-violence, of the different ways of using it. And there was a complete commitment, I think a growing commitment to non-violence with each of these conversations. So now the relationship between Bacha Khan and Gandhi is a very interesting one. And certainly in India, in the pantheon of nationalist leaders, where Gandhi is on top and even Nehru comes below him, in that pantheon with Gandhi, you would at the most put Bacha Khan. he would be up there. He wouldn't be part of the next pantheon. That's the kind of reverence people hold him, because there was a recognition that there was a quality, a saintliness. People everywhere in the frontier, I mean, I write about this, the language of talking about him as a paigambar or a fakir or as a saintly figure was something that people talked about. And so he was in that sense most similar to Gandhi. And Nehru came in and out of the frontier, and most fatally, I was going to say, but fatally for their future, he came in 1946, where against everybody's advice, including Bacha Khan and Dr. Khan Sahib, he came, he didn't have a good experience, and I think something changed quite dramatically as a result. But what this Congress and Gandhi and Nehru's association, who were all very fond of Bacha Khan, and he was in and out of India all the time, was this development of this idea of self-reliance, which had already started in the 1920s, long before the association with Gandhi or with the Congress had started. So there was, people ask me, was this a Gandhian idea in the frontier? And I would argue against that, because a lot of the ideas of nonviolence, of self-reliance, of self-reform, were ideas that already had been developing through the 1920s on the back of all the activities that he had been doing. But khadi and spinning and this portable charkha that was developed that you could carry around and spin was a disciplining of this and emblematic representation of the self-reliance that caught on. And so Gandhi would come to the frontier, and one of the guys I spoke with, he remembers being quizzed by Gandhi, saying, I want to talk to these. He said to Bacha Khan, can I talk to them alone without you? And he said, of course, so he left the room, and he said, tell me, what would happen if Bacha Khan turned around and said, nonviolence is not really working, let's take up arms, that's what is required. So these chaps said, sorry, you don't understand, Bacha Khan would never say that. So he said, no, but what if he did? And he said, no, he wouldn't say that, that's not him. He's been saying this for so many years, he's not going to suddenly change this. No, but what if he did? They said, well, he can say what he wants, we're completely committed to nonviolence. Now so Gandhi's questioning, their response, I think is a very revealing, there was this constant amazement that you could have. Actually, the most successful Gandhian movement, the most successful civil disobedience movement happened in the frontier, not anywhere else in India. You just didn't get this kind of sustained, disciplined struggle anywhere else. And this set up what happened in 47, which is a whole story which I've run out of time to go into, but we can talk about it, you might want to know. But at the end of the day, what Bacha Khan said to Gandhi is what everybody remembers, both in the frontier and in India. Aapne to humko bhediyon ke samne dhakel diya. They didn't want to be part of, because by then, remember, only 2 provinces in British India had a referendum imposed on them. It was Frontier Province and Sylhet. And Frontier Province, and anywhere where there was a Congress ministry, the ministry got to choose between India and Pakistan. At this point, there was a Congress ministry in the frontier. But in this case, that was made an exception, and they put a referendum fully knowing that the Muslim League dynamics as it had emerged meant that most of the Khudaai Khidmatgars actually boycotted the referendum. It was a very low turnout, and in that low turnout, the vote to remain in Pakistan came through. So it was a complete and utter capitulation of everything they had stood for. So if I had to just summarize, I've said I would, so 2 more minutes now, is that okay? A couple of things, 6 points if one had to summarize of why we should remember these stories. And there's lots of details I haven't gone into, but we'll leave it there for the moment. Culture is a word that we hear a lot. This is our culture, or military is told to learn the culture of societies they're going to have engagement in. You talk about cultural bias, you talk about corporations having to, in order to penetrate markets, they need to know the culture. And there is an idea that the culture of societies, and especially societies in the global south, is somehow a box that stays hermetically sealed and unchanging forever. That's our culture. But the the Khuday Khidmatgar movement is a very good example of how fluid the nature of culture is. Anthropologists, that's my discipline, will tell you that actually what culture is that it is constantly dynamic, it is constantly open to reinterpretation and change. And so the first takeaway is that culture is not one of these hermetically sealed boxes, it is actually a fluid dynamic field. If and this is the second takeaway, if you can have something as intrinsic to notions of Bukhtonness, of Bukhtonwali, of this idea of badla, of badal, of revenge, or of milmastia, of hospitality, these ideas which make a Pushtun, this is the understandings, the practice of this is the habitus of being a Pushtun. Those very ideas were taken to be molded, interpreted in a way that made the adoption of nonviolence possible, that if you think of the colonial government as unwanted guests who you now had to get rid of, somehow, politely but firmly, it was possible to put it in that idiom of hospitality. And you certainly could marshal the idea of courage like nobody else as the Pukhtuns could, and therefore could be, best civil disobedience protesters anywhere. The idea of Dadabate, of giving shelter even to your enemy, is again, you can see the elective affinity between these concepts and the idea of nonviolence. Thirdly, it showed that Islam has the capacity for radical reinterpretation. You could take, without compromising at all your Islamic credentials, you could reinterpret it for something that hadn't been imagined before, certainly in this part of the world. So there was nothing intrinsic about Islam. There was no intrinsic link between Islam and violence. Fourthly is a slight, even more general point which I wanted to make, which I've been thinking about recently in the context of my work in democracy, is that ideas are likely to succeed. Any of you who've been activists will know, to sustain any movement over a period of 17 years is extraordinarily difficult. And one of the reasons this probably worked is because the idea it wasn't Gandhi's idea that was being implemented in the frontier. I doubt it would have been so successful. But the ideas had come organically out of various contestations, discussions, experiments through the 1920s. So there was a sense of ownership about them. So importing ideologies, whether they're Islamic ideologies, whether they're Marxist ideologies, requires that you've got to have a vanguard that protects that ideology and spreads it. Right? So you have either cadres, or you have mullahs, or you have various people who are the keepers of the ideology, and they are going to tell the masses what to do. And that's not the nature of the Khuday Khidmatgar movement at all, as you could see. I mean, they're not proselytizers. Bacha Khan is sort of tirelessly traveling, walking from one village to the other, but it's the message he's spreading is very simple. And in fact, what he's saying to people is not ideological. The fight is. Fifthly, you can have a really well worked out ideology, but if it doesn't capture the imagination, if it doesn't fire young people up, the symbolic value of uniforms, the music, the drills, the camaraderie that was created through that, anyone who knows anything about any army will know that they will die for each other. That's the first solidarity to the regiment, always. And that sense that you can build and capture the imagination is clearly important for any social movement. Sixthly, is an idea that we have to, every time there is a global discussion of should we intervene in Syria, should Afghanistan be attacked, what is the post 9/11 world, should we intervene, we as in sitting in London, the vantage from here, Western powers, it's that we. There is always a conversation about a just war, that you can justify the means because of the ends that you're hoping to achieve. So if we bomb the hell out of this place, we'll get rid of the militants and then we'll have democracy. That's usually what we're told, right? And this idea that you can justify however violent the means to get the ends that you want is an idea that flies in the face of any civil disobedience experiment. Because there the belief is very much that your means have to be ethical. You have to have, your protest has to be ethical. You can be disobedient, but you have to be ethical. And what you're disobedient about is a system that you think doesn't have any legitimacy. That's why it's disobedience. But it's not chaos, and it's certainly not violent. Because only when you fight from the moral high ground like that can you have a lasting relationship with your enemy. So it's a question of bringing your enemy into that conversation rather than making it oppositional. Now this is a fairly, it's something that develops out of all civil disobedience movements. And finally, I mean, only because 6 is not a good number, 7 is a better number. So let me leave you with 7 takeaways. And I think the 7th takeaway has to be the issue of courage. And I've said it already, but I think it's worth underscoring that you can't get any kind of protest, any kind of civil disobedience, certainly not the kind of enemy that the Khuday Khidmat girls were dealing with, without immense amount of courage. And when I think of young Malala on that bus, and of her writing the blog, and of fearlessly saying that, this is not about me, this is about an issue, this is about all girls, it's about education, and no, I'm not going to be told what to say and what not to say. I think that's the kind of courage you need, and without that, I mean, that's a sort of basic element to it, to any kind of protest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we now welcome to the podium Mr. Ziauddin Yousafzai.
Thank you. Thank you. James, you can stop me whenever you wish, because I speak for so long sometime. And if 4 of you just yawn, I'll stop. So I'm Ziauddin Yousafzai, and once upon a time I was Malala's father, but now she's my daughter. Thank you very much, Mukulika Banerjee. Thank you. I had heard about you, but I never met you. It's an honor to meet you. I must acknowledge the presence of our former High Commissioner for Pakistan, Wajid Shamsul Hassan. He was a great support of our family when we came to UK. Thank you. I think the book, Unarmed Pathan, it's a great contribution to Pashtun history. It's a great contribution to Pakistan. And it's a great contribution to all pacifist and peace-loving people in the world. Thank you for this, because, Pashtuns and Pathans are unarmed. It's like something unusual, and it needs hard work, Bacha and stamina, to make a Pashtun unarmed, because we think we have a wise, not wise, but we have like a coat, a traditional coat, that the women ornament is like bracelet and jumar and bangles, and men's ornament is gun. So the men who use gun as an ornament, as jewelry, and you take away his jewelry, I think it's something historical, incredible. And about Pathans and Pashtuns, I mean, whatever you call us, we are very sweet people, very peace-loving people, people of civilization and culture. And I'm standing here not because of the politics. I'm here as one of the hundreds and thousands of followers of Bacha, because I believe in Bacha Khan's philosophy, I believe in Bacha Khan's struggle, and I believe in Bacha Khan's values. when I was, I think it was 84, I was in year 8 or 9 in school, and my father he was a cleric, he was a Maulana, but he was not a Maulana, Wahhabi Maulana, he was a very beautiful Maulana. He got his education from India, and he met like great leaders, he saw great leaders of the Indian freedom movement like Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali, Gandhi ji, Nehru, Bacha. And I was lucky that I was growing up in this Maulana's house. He used to tell me their stories. And one of his favorite stories was Bacha. And when I was in year, like in school, in year 8 or 7, it was 80s, 84, 85. And it was a time, it was a crucial time of the geostrategic politics of that region, when the American establishment, with the help of the Pakistani Ziaul Haq establishment, radicalized the Pakistani society through Islam. As you just mentioned that, Bacha Khan's legacy could have been a great legacy for a peaceful, prosperous, democratic Pakistan. But unfortunately, as that legacy was eliminated, and the people were so much coerced, and the atrocities which were inflicted on the followers of Bacha Khan, I think history has a few examples of that. So that legacy was eliminated, abolished, and that was replaced by the Maulanas and the deep establishment of Pakistan. I mean, if our leaders have chosen the political army, in the power corridors of Pakistan, if these Maulanas, they are also against Pakistan, they used to call Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah kafir, non-Muslim. But the Pakistani establishment had a fantastic friendship with the Maulanas. And that militant Islam was introduced to Pakistan as a whole, and particularly in the Pashtunkhwa in the northwest of Pakistan. And our beautiful society, peaceful society, I just mentioned one verse from Pashto. We say, Yar mi Hinduzam Musulmanim, the Yar da para tar masaj jaru kohoma. In Pashto it means, I am a Muslim and my friend is a Hindu. And I can sweep and clean a mandir, a temple, for in the love of my Hindu friend. This is what we are. But unfortunately, that did not happen. And in that, I mean, when I was there in 80s, and I was taught the Holy Quran by a teacher in a mosque. And because of that geopolitical and geostrategic, and these Taliban and these Mujahideen were assets, and madrasas radicalized the Pakistani society. So my teacher was teaching me the Holy Quran, and he inculcated in me this passion for jihad too much that, believe me, that I used to pray to God every prayer, after every prayer, oh God, let there be a fight between the Muslims and non-Muslims, and let me be killed. I didn't want to kill anybody. Let me be killed, let me be martyred. That was the time that I came across two kinds of people. One were from the Democratic Student Federation, and the other were the Bacha Khan, the followers of Bacha Khan. And my father used to tell me the stories of Bacha Khan. And that gave me a different version of life. Otherwise, I would have been a great extremist if Bacha Khan had not been there. And when I went to the college, and then I joined Pashtun Student Federation, and I became the General Secretary of the Pashtun Student Federation in SOAS. you know, you might have heard about Jamaat Islami, and if there is anybody from Jamaat Islami, they should not mind its effect. And I don't want to offend them. But their organization, their student organization, used to bring arms to the college, pistols to the college. And one day I challenged them on stage that, look, you will never find me with just a short knife or with a razor, because I believe in non-violence, because I believe in peace, I believe in patience. And this was what I learned from Bacha. And later, when I started this school in SWAT, and I became somehow, on my own small level, a peace campaigner, and these Taliban came. They introduced themselves to the SWAT Valley. And then we had a very successful military operation in 2009. And when we came back to SWAT, we had a meeting with the army, and the chief, he told us, I was the spokesperson of the 2,600 notables in SWAT. And we had this meeting, and the people were offered by the government that now the operation has been completed, and now there is peace, but we can give you the license for the guns, and we will have these village committees, defense committees, and you can take arms by yourselves, and you can make lashkars, armies of your own. And I was the first man who told, just in face of the higher authorities, that not at all. We will never pick up guns, because you are our security forces. It's your duty. I will raise my voice with peace, and with love, and with passions. This was Bacha, which was speaking. And then in UN speech, when Malala says that I believe in forgiveness, and she says that I have forgiven the Talib who shot me. And if he comes in front of me, I will never shoot him, because I believe in the philosophy of Bacha. This is Bacha. But again, we must call a spade a spade. If I come here and I'm a so-called diplomat as well, like education attaché, but it will be great dishonesty if I don't speak the truth. I should not waste your time. I should be honest to myself and honest to my country, Pakistan. And whatever I say, what I'm saying, it's out of my love. Unfortunately, all warlords and war heroes, whether they are from Islamic era or from the Pakistani history, they are being taught in the curriculum. All war heroes, right from Khalid bin Walid to Tariq bin Ziauddin, everybody, Muhammad bin Qasim. But the only person who is not there, he is Bacha. He is not there. He is Bacha. And my children, they are taught that Tariq bin Ziauddin burnt his boats and conquered Spain. And this militaristic, this kind of, to conquer the world. A Pashtun boy, he learns in school that Tariq bin Ziauddin conquered Spain. And then he thinks, okay, I'm going to conquer Afghanistan, or India, or England, Kashmir. And what happens? This Pashtun guy, this Pashtun boy, when he grows old, he really goes to Spain. How? He goes from Pakistan to Iran, and to Turkey, and to Italy, and then to Spain even, but he doesn't go to conquer. He goes there to seek sustenance for his family, to get food. Because he can't find even jobs and food and quality education in his own land. Because that whole region is suffering from violence. So that's why it's time, I think. I was just, when you were thinking, sir, you were talking, I really say that it's a tribute and compliment to Bacha Khan to call him a Sarhadi Gandhi or Frontier Gandhi. But I must say that Bacha Khan is beyond that. Bacha Khan is not just Sarhadi Gandhi. Gandhi also inspired Martin Luther King. Gandhi also inspired Nelson Mandela. But Martin Luther King is not American Gandhi, or Nelson Mandela is not African Gandhi. Gandhi was great, he was huge. But Martin Luther King is Martin Luther King. And Nelson Mandela is Nelson Mandela. And Bacha Khan is Bacha Khan. He is gigantic. He was tall in stature, but believe me, his philosophy is taller than Himalayas. He was a very genuine person. He was very simple, very, I think James is looking towards me. I'm just coming to the last words, I mean, in today's world, Bacha Khan legacy is very, very apt. It's very much needed. I need Bacha Khan's philosophy of non-violence. My people need it. Pakistan need it. When we talk about violence, right from the domestic violence that is done against women in the houses or children in school, to the sectarian violence, ethnic violence, state coercion, for all these evils, the answer is not military operations or more coercion. The answer is the philosophy of non-violence, the rule of non-violence. And I think there should be no, I don't understand, it doesn't fit in my logic, believe me, that why, is it Bacha Khan's crime that he's in Pakistan and he was a Pakistani? He pledged allegiance with Pakistan when Pakistan came into being. He was a true Pakistani, and he was, we must acknowledge and we must confess, we all must know that one thing, Bacha Khan was a very true man, a very true person, very genuine person. You can doubt anything, but you can't doubt his credibility. When he pledged that he's a Pakistani, why should he be doubted? And why should there be a problem that if you call Qaeda-Azam as a leader, Bacha Khan should be a traitor? No, they both were leaders. And I must say that if Pakistan, it takes the Qaeda-Azam's rules of faith, unity and discipline, coupled with the non-violence philosophy of Pakistan, Bacha Khan, the peace philosophy and passions philosophy, and the righteousness philosophy of Bacha Khan, Pakistan will be a great country, a successful country. And this strategy or this policy which is going on till this day, that if we accept the heroes of the small provinces, like if we accept Bacha Khan as a great leader, it will be a threat to Pakistan. No, it will never happen. It will make Pakistan greater. We are human beings. We are not chameleons that we color or change. We can't negate ourselves. It can't happen. And just to end my words, you see, we have 4 provinces, and if there's a 1, it will become 4. Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan, Pukhtunkhwa is equal to 4. This is what they want. I say let everyone, these 1 should not dissolve into 4. Let this everyone has its own identity, and let it be 1111. I mean, this is simple. Thank you very much. Just I'll say that Mata Tamgada Badare Teri Hushar Tedade Chibadade Hauri Atal Atal Nawaima. A Pashtun poet says that they bind a turban on my head of honor and of prestige, of bravery, but they have only one condition, that I will not call my hero as my hero. and it can't happen. It will not work. Thank you very much.
So let's actually jump straight into questions. It would be nice if some of these address the continued legacies for and Bacha Khan in the contemporary world. Although I think we can do anything related to the current first, and then yes.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My name is Lutfullah. I'm just first going to protest because one of the takeaway points was courage. And I'm going to have this courage to protest against Mr. Ziauddin's position on Pakistan. I'm not very sure that Bacha Khan believed in Pakistan. And that leads me to another question which Dr. Banerjee might be able to answer. The motivations for Bacha Khan, why he decided to be buried in Afghanistan. So the Pakistani establishment, they continue to inflict atrocities on Pashtuns on both sides of the border, in Waziristan and in form of terrorism and so on. So Mr. Yousafzai, dear Bakhanam Warama, don't you think that your position that you have when it comes to Pakistan is in contradiction to Bacha Khan's position in Pakistan, because he did not believe in Pakistan, if I'm not mistaken. او اخیره خبر می داد پښتو کې غواړم چې درته وایم لکه انډیانو ته چې باچا خان وویل چې تاسې موږ لیوانو ته ور واچولو تاسې فکر نه کوئ چې تاسې خپله لور لیوانو ته په خوله کې ور واچوله. Yes, the last part was, when the Indians said to when Bacha Khan said to the Indians that you have thrown us to the wolves. Doesn't Mr. Yousafzai think that he has thrown his daughter to the wolves as well?
No, that's what I'm you've asked two questions at least, and let's let our speakers answer them.
Thank you for your question.
Okay. My understanding of the history is that, yes, Bacha Khan, like many other leaders in India, and most of them, they are doing politics in Pakistan. Like, I'll give you example of Maulana Fazl Rahman, Jamiat Ulama Islam, and Sirajullah from Jamaat Islami. All their leaders, they opposed Pakistan. And as I mentioned in my talk, that even they called Muhammad Ali Jinnah as Kafir. Kafir-e-Azam. Bacha Khan never did that. Bacha Khan pledged allegiance to Pakistan, and he took an oath as a Pakistani, and he was the member of the legislation. What else, one wants after that? Yes, he had a very strong stance on the provincial autonomy, and he wanted that within Pakistan, within the frame of Pakistan, the Pashtunkhwa, the people of Sindh, the people of Balochistan in Punjab, they should have their own identity. They should have power, and they should have freedom to use their resources. And he wanted this decentralization of Pakistan, that their resources should not be exploited, and there should be no repression for these small nations in Pakistan. He was very clear about his being buried in Afghanistan. I think it might be one of the peaceful protests from Bacha Khan, that he believes ethnically that's the same.
I think also what happened when he was very ill and in the hospital in Delhi, just before he died. It was really imminent, his death. The Indian government said, we would like to offer you a final place to rest next to, between Gandhi and Nehru's Samadhi. Samadhi is not a word that everybody understands.
The burning places.
Yeah, the mausoleums, where they remember.
They're the cremation
open
sites.
spaces. And they said, we want, that's the kind of importance they gave him. And from his hospital bed, he told his son, he said, please thank them, but no, I don't want to be buried in India. I don't want to be buried in Pakistan either. But remember, in Afghanistan, he had a home in Jalalabad.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's buried in the garden of his home. And you're quite right that it is a rejection, but it's a rejection of both countries and what they became. I mean, this is already 1988. A lot has happened in India and in Pakistan, and it's quite interesting. Narasimha Rao, the Prime Minister of India, who was one of the old Congress hands, and he was Prime Minister when the commemoration of Bacha Khan's centenary was being celebrated. And he said, that you don't see politicians like this anymore. At the moment, all the politicians just smile and say, you're wonderful. They're always smiling and waving at the crowds. And Bacha Khan was of that generation who all they did, they got up to make a speech and they scolded and scolded and scolded their audience, saying, you're not doing this, you should be doing this, we are imperfect, we need to do better. So it was in that sense a complete, not just a rejection, but a real disappointment, I think, with what the subcontinent had become. I mean, how many wars had India and Pakistan fought by then, by 1988? So I think it was a rejection of that. It wasn't so much a pro-Afghanistan, but yeah, I mean, Afghanistan, he decided to make that his home. He wasn't putting his allegiance either place. He went to a third country. So I think one has to see it in that light.
We had a question here, yes.
Hello. My name is Danish Alvi, and I'm a computer science student. Actually, I'm not a student of arts. First, I would like to appreciate all the speakers. It was a very intellectual conversation. My first thing, which I would like to ask Ms. Banerjee, I would like to ask her that although everyone over here, including me myself, is a proponent of non-violence, don't you see that there is a contradiction from all the Indian movements of freedom? Like, for example, the freedom of the version which Bhagat Singh wanted to introduce. Bhagat Singh did at times, and like Udham Singh, who was also known as Ram Mohammed Singh, he also did some violence just for the sake of independence. Now, by no means am I trying to advocate violence in any form, but I'm just trying to say that is this a contradiction that exists? And I've got a second thing to ask to Mr.
Let's limit it to one question.
Okay, no problem.
Per questioner, yes. Yeah, why don't we take a couple questions? We had one over here, and after that, I saw your hand first. Let's do two for now. Then I saw you. All right. This gentleman.
Thanks.
Thanks. I'd like to ask Mr. Yousafzai, having worked in Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, I'd like to ask Mr. Yousafzai, is there any hope of this attitude changing in Pakistan? Because this militant attitude of Pakistan is in the West. I'm a convert Muslim. And this militant attitude of Pakistan in the West has come here. It's partly because of Saudiization, but you can't have music in Islamic schools when the Indian subcontinent is a great heritage of Islamic. So is this heritage of violence, of the Maududiization, the Islamic statization of Islam, isn't that having a negative effect all over the world with Pakistanis even living in the West? How does Pakistan have any hope of overcoming this? What do you see? Bacha Khan is not taught in schools in Pakistan. So many of my colleagues said he's a traitor. I mean, young Pakistan. So what's the hope? How can we move forward and get over this problem that Pakistan is facing? Thank you.
Pardon, we had our friend back there. Feel free.
Thank you to all the speakers. I want to really commend Mr. Yousafzai. I want to really commend Mr. Yousafzai in terms of the work he's doing, the work his daughter's doing. I think it's really making a huge difference.
And I think all over Pakistan, including in Punjab where I'm from, or in KPK where my friends are from, we could really do with more education. My question was, a lot of criticism and conspiracy theories have been directed towards yourself and Malala. So you have, especially people like Jamaat-e-Islami, for example, saying that you may be American agents, you may be involved with India overall. I think, personally, it's something which I think is quite common. I think personally it's a result of ignorance. But why do you think this is, and how can we as a society deal with it, with these attitudes, and move forward?
Okay, so we've got 3 so far. I think that's good enough for the... Yes, these are quite contentious little questions, so why don't we just get started? Yes, let's just try that. So I saw... Well, no, so first we answer the questions. I'm pointing out that we have a very limited number of...
I'll try to give short answers, which is very difficult for me, to be honest. But I'll try. About the militant Islam which you referred to, it's really a big challenge for the Muslim world. And if you think, from this militancy, the Muslim world is suffering a lot.
It has been, now it is, you can say that it has migrated, or this thing has imported, I can't know what word to use, but it is everywhere. But as I mentioned in my talk, Pakistan as a state, and we as a society, we have to decide. Bacha Khan used to refer to the Islamic teaching when he used to convince his people about peace and to be non-violent. We have to take up that philosophy, and as we have that very big national action plan to launch military strikes against the militants, I think to defeat some armed groups with stronger armed groups, it may work for some time temporarily, but for the long, sustainable solution, we as a state, without any bias, without any prejudice, we have to go back to Bacha Khan. So if we introduce Bacha Khan's philosophy, and not only Bacha Khan, there are all other great people as well. I can say even Muhammad Ali Jinnah, he never incited people that they should do armed. He also believed in in faith and discipline and doing his struggle with argument. So if we take all these good stories and we introduce them through our media, through our schools, through our madrasas, to our temples and mosques, that is the only way out. This is my view. And about the conspiracy theories, I know, I hear about it, to be honest. I think the most important thing that I should know what I do. Really, I should know what I do. And I should not be afraid of the conspiracy theories of the people who, they may not be agreeing with us. They may be thinking of Malala as a threat to their ideologies. That when women are empowered, they can't see a female in the market, in school, in jobs. It's like challenging the honor of the men. That's why, that is the only way out with them, to call us raw agent or American agent. I know whose agent I am. Believe me, I know.
Say one thing to this contradiction question. That's what I was saying with the reason why I put that photograph of Bacha Khan with Bose, Subhash Chandra Bose, was it's just one example of the kind of coexistence right through the nationalist movement, right across the entire space of British India, where you get different kinds of experiments of anti-colonial struggle. So it's not a contradiction, it's a coexistence. And to say, this is the nonviolent civil disobedience adoption by the Congress under Gandhi's leadership is something that really begins to happen from the 1920s onwards, late 1920s, and gathers momentum. That's the last 20 years, after all, of the freedom struggle. And like you correctly say, But one thing I'll say, which links to the point that you made just now of we will follow Bacha Khan and obviously I think we're agreed that it is the more civilized response. And I talked of moral high ground. But one thing that my old Khuday Khidmat guys also told me was how difficult it is to adopt civil disobedience when your enemy doesn't respect the rules. One of the things about civil disobedience is, it's a shaming strategy, it is one of courage, but the other side also has to recognize the sheer courage of what you're doing. And my interest in this movement is as much to watch how the British colonial repertoire of repression is slowly changing over this period. So they are having to, they didn't have jails in the frontier in the 30s because, nobody quoted arrest. So they had to take everybody to Punjab every time they arrested somebody. So then they built Haripur jail and they got the prisoners to build that jail because they said, oh, now they're suddenly, all quoting arrest, we've got to put them somewhere. They could see that actually that kind of violence against them was only increasing numbers of recruitment of people joining the movement, so they realized they had to shift tactics. So it has to be a certain dialogue, and if you're faced with an enemy that says, oh, they're so stupid, they're not carrying any guns, we're just going to shoot them dead in cold blood, it doesn't work. So, one has to create the conversation somehow, and that's very, very hard to do.
Okay, we've got time for one more round of questions by my reckoning. So you've got the mic. I saw your hand a long time ago. Then you I saw a long time ago as well. And okay, yeah, I saw you a while ago as well.
He's sitting right in front of you.
I mean, it's hard to miss, yes.
What about the backbenchers?
Yeah.
Backbenchers.
All right, is there anybody on the back benches? Sure, you're on the middle bench. That's one other thing that I was thinking. No, so let's take one more round of 3 questions and we'll see how we're set for time. But you, and sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Muslim Bahar. I'm an Afghan refugee who's spent some time in Pakistan in Sawabi, which I'm grateful. Spending my time there, I studied sometime in madrasa, sometime in school. As a kid, I was taught different stuff. As a kid, I was taught in madrasa, for example, and schools as well. If you go to foreign countries, if you see a kafir and you shake hand with kafir, you need to cut your hand. And so when I got here, there were sometimes where for 2-3 months I didn't shake hands with people. And I was scared. And so my question really is, you're talking about Bacha Khan as a leader, non-violent, and then why is it that non-violence forgiveness is not taught in the land where he was born in, and why is it that I, as a Muslim, have to learn more about my religion here in a foreign country than my own country, which is called an Islamic country? That's all really.
Okay, thanks. Let's move the microphone back to our friend over here, the opposite side. Yes. Pink shirt, yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. My question is related to this cultural point that Dr. Banerjee mentioned, and it also touched some of the points that Mr. Yousafzai made. It's about the emergence and the empowerment of the mosque and the mullah, especially sponsored by the state, and how it countered the social institution of Khanate in this region of the country. And this cultural fluidity, the concept of the cultural fluidity that you talked, was somehow, I should say that the culture of this region was misused, or it was exploited by the state in taking the Pashtuns to fight their wars in Afghanistan and in so many other cases. So instead of this, if the cultural had led to evolve naturally, and the social institution of Khanate was in the same state, it wasn't encountered by the mosque and the mullah, we would have had the legacy of Bacha Khan. So your comment on this. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, right. Okay.
No, it's, I want some academic perspectives from Dr. Banerjee because she has been in the area and have researched. So how do you see this?
Oh, so one, yeah, that's a good one.
Thank you very much. My name is Mohammad Sarwar. I am the journalist. Both of you have shed a light on the good achievements of Bacha Khan. No doubt, he was a great leader. You may disagree with his ideology or way of thinking, but nobody can ignore the efforts he has made for the region and other things. These were my comments. My question is that since 1947, nothing has been done to rectify the image of Bacha Khan in Pakhtunistan, Pakhtunkhwa, or in Pakistan. So far, everyone, from the childhood to its age now, he considers that the Bacha Khan was a traitor. He was the colleague of the Gandhi. He was against the Pakistan. But unfortunately, his followers, none of them has tried so far to correct the history. There is no book at all. There is no literature at all. We didn't learn in educational institutions at all. So my question to Dr. Banerjee and to you is, would you like to do an effort to rectify his image? And the just related to question is this, that Bacha Khan was the hero, at least hero, for Pakhtunistan, for Pakhtun. But so far, his organization or political party, ANP, could not got that support which it deserved, even from the Pakhtun. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got 3 questions. Let's deal with, pardon sir, we have 3 questions already. So,
For you, I will. Yeah, I have no questions, but I just first of all thank everyone to have this debate, because I am General Secretary of ANP UK, the follower Bacha Khan. So that's why I just want to clarify a few things. First of all, this is a misconception. Bacha Khan was not against Pakistan. He was against the division of Indian subcontinent. So first, that's a misconception. Secondly, you have rightly mentioned it, but if we write our history honestly, no one will ask these questions. Because when Muhtarma Fatma Jinnah was contesting election against Ayub Khan, it was the followers of Bacha Khan who stood next to her. So if somebody is questioning his loyalty to Pakistan, he should just and they should go and see the history and read the real history, not the history of Pakistan studies and stuff like that. But the other thing is that we need this philosophy today, because that's what the whole region needs. The extremism, the jihadi stuff which was imposed upon us, the whole Pakistan. If we and that's one of the reasons. That's why these kind of leaders were. And I must say that he was in jail, spent jail 37 years, more than Nelson Mandela. But unfortunately, he was jailed even more after the creation of Pakistan, because he was named like this. So the people should not know the real philosophy, the real ideology of Bacha Khan. That's the main reason. And I agree with him that we are doing. But all the books which were written by our followers or followers of Bacha Khan were banned in Pakistan. And some of the books have to be printed in Afghanistan. So we need to rediscover Bacha Khan and push his ideology to the ordinary people, and especially in our area where we are still going through all this extremism. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, sir. So This is certainly the last round of questions, and yes.
Yeah, you should have the last word anyway. So let me go first, and just to say about the culture concept, I don't think we're on the same page in what you're calling the fluid culture. The idea of that I was talking about is, you know, that it can be fluid enough to be reinterpreted. It can be molded to create responses to different predicaments. Your statement about the state misusing it and is a slightly different point. And I think, you know, if I had to respond to both these comments together, this whole thing of, was Bacha Khan a traitor? No, he wasn't. Of course, you know, there's all this counter evidence. What happened in the 80s with the Soviets, with the whole recruitment and so on. All of this. And remember, you know, when I was doing this piece of work, the book came out in January 2001. Pashtun wasn't a household word in the world as it is today. It's only after 9/11 that it's unfortunately, for all the wrong reasons, it's become a word that everybody all across the, you know, Pashtun has become. Nobody knew this word before this, right? So there are, now to say history stuff can happen, you know, states and governments shouldn't do this, so on, is not much of an argument. I think one thing one takeaway from all of this is that there are always costs to forgetting your own history. If it isn't, you know, what happened in the 1980s happened, and stuff will happen, that's what global politics works like. What was missing was any alternative narrative around the Pashtuns, around Islam, around, you know, so any kind of alternative response which you would have expected against that kind of Islamic recruitment just simply wasn't available. And I don't think it is, you know, I think the books, would it be banned today is the question. And if they're not going to be banned today, I think it is our responsibility to create a different narrative. And, you know, this OUP Pakistan is reissuing books next year, 70 books to celebrate Pakistan's 70th independence. This can be translated into Pashto, we can write shorter versions, we can send it to school children. Because unless, you know, that kind of hard graft around Bacha Khan's Azad schools or Zia Saab's work with schooling, it has to, unless there is a fairly organic understanding of one's own history, those responses are not going to come. So there are no shortcuts to this.
I don't think there is much to be said. You said all the things. My thinking is that, I mean, we have to start from education system. We have to change the paradigm, and we have to change the curriculum in our schools and madrasas. That is the place we have to start with. And first of all, I mean, I must say that Bacha Khan should be officially, I use the word officially. Bacha Khan should be officially acknowledged, recognized, accepted by the state of Pakistan. One of our friends said that the Bacha Khan's followers are not supporting, I mean, NP is not supporting what? I mean, NP, yeah. Many people supporting NP as well, and I think when it comes to the Pakistan's, whenever it comes to the Pakistan, I mean, NP is the party. I'm not their member, to be honest, but NP has given a lot of sacrifices. Only in Swat and in that region, 700 notables, leaders, small and big, of NP who are being killed. This is a huge sacrifice. But I think that Pakistan, we as a state have to be pluralistic. We have to introduce to our children the true picture of history. We have to forget all this thing which has been built on hate, on prejudice, and with an open heart all sages, reformers, whether they belong to Pashtunkhwa, whether they belong to Punjab, Great Sindh, or Sindh, or Balochistan, they must be appreciated, they must be acknowledged. And to be honest, I don't say that Bacha Khan is a great hero. I don't say it because he was a Pashtun. I say it because I myself, after studying him, I have found him one of the most beautiful human beings. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Please join me in thanking Dr. Mukulika Banerjee and Mr. Ziauddin Yousafzai.